Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do the proposed minimum requirement for Doom Dark Ages. And the proposed minimum requirement go as follow. AMD Zen 2 or Intel 10 Gen CPU at 3.2 GHz with 8 core 16 thread or better. Example will be the Ryzen 7 3700X or better, or Intel Core i7-10700K or better. 16 GB of RAM, NVIDIA or AMD hardware ray tracing capable GPU with 8 GB of dedicated VRAM or better. Example, NVIDIA RTX 2060 Super or better, or AMD RX 6600 or better. I don't know why they didn't list any Intel GPU, because the game actually support XeSS. Anyway, 100 GB of space, and the specification to play the game is 1080p 60 FPS at low quality settings, and NVME SSD storage required. That's the first in my testing. We're gonna have to test a regular SATA SSD in the future. Anyway, welcome to Response PC. I'm Dunk. Let's game on. Now starting off with the Intel and NVIDIA combo, it will be the i7-10700F, because I don't have the K variant. The main difference with the K variant is higher clock speed. The F variant max out at 4.8 GHz and the K variant max out at 5.1 GHz. But either way, as you will see, the F or the K won't even matter in this situation. And I have bigger issue on end. I have the RTX 2060 non-super, so I have 6 GB of VRAM instead of 8 GB of VRAM. A little bit lower clock speed also. Right now I'm playing 1080p, the lowest setting possible, and no upscaling. We get an average of 27 FPS. We under 30 FPS, and we way under the 60 FPS advertised to play at the lowest settings. And if we look at the performance, the memory we're using 9.7 GB of RAM, we're okay. The CPU is using 27% of its possible performance, so the K or the F, there's no issue. But the GPU, yes, it's pegged at 99%, but it's using 5.8, 5.9. We max it out the 6 GB VRAM of the GPU, so the Super will make a big difference, as we are VRAM bottleneck right now. It's playable, but not the most playable possible, and quite far from the 60 FPS the proposed minimum requirement said that we're going to reach. But I really do not meet the minimum requirement on the VRAM part. But if you don't mind, you can enable DLSS, and now you'll get an average FPS of 55 FPS, getting closer to the 60 FPS at the low settings. So probably with the Super, with DLSS, you reach your 60 FPS. But the dev didn't write down that you need any upscaling to reach 60 FPS. Now we know you actually need. We are again VRAM limited. The GPU is pegged at 99% utilization, using 5.8, 5.9 GB of VRAM out of 6. Having a little bit more VRAM will give us the little bit of FPS missing to reach 60 FPS. The CPU is still okay. We are in the high 40s percentage of utilization, and the RAM we are at 9.6. There's no issue there. So it seems the RTX 2060 Super is probably the real minimum requirement, because right now DLSS that we are using, it's balanced, so we still have quality and native. Maybe even the RTX 2060 Super won't be enough to be at native quality, and for sure it's not the case if you don't even want any DLSS. Now if we jump to the AMD side of things, I do have the AMD Ryzen 7 3700X, and I do have the RX 6600. So I don't have to explain or compare to any equivalent hardware this time. And yes, obviously with 16 GB of RAM. We're still at 1080p, lowest settings, and no upscaling. And that gives us a usage of 10.2 GB of RAM out of 16, quite similar to the Intel system. The CPU is in the mid-30, a bit less usage than the i7-10700F, but probably similar to the 10700K. And for the GPU, we peg at 99% and using 6.5 GB of VRAM to 7 GB of VRAM out of 8. So that's where the 8 GB of VRAM is required. We get an average of 45 FPS. That means we are not reaching the 60 FPS that the dev said that we're going to reach. I mean, maybe they didn't lie, but they didn't told us that you actually need upscaling to reach the 60 FPS. And if you go with upscaling option, we can go FSR, because this is AMD, and we can also enable frame gen, which by the way I would not recommend. The frame gen, yes, you reach your over 60 FPS, but the input lag is insanely disturbing. I would consider that unplayable with a frame gen. So if you just want to keep FSR, you gotta put the FSR at a quality, not native, otherwise we won't reach 60 FPS. So FSR quality, you get your 60 FPS plus. And you can even crank the settings higher than low. You can reach up to medium and even high to still have over 60 FPS. I would have loved to have a RTX 2060 Super to see a similar result. But the RX 6600 can do the job and more than enough. We using barely 70% of its session of the GPU, mean there is more power to be delivered. But keep in mind that I'm still at the beginning of the game. I didn't meet hundreds of enemy at the same times. Maybe that's where the GPU is going to rush a bit more. So I guess you can say the RTX 2060 non-super is able to play at 60 FPS if you don't mind DLSS. That means the 2060 Super will be able to play that 60 FPS, but probably also again with DLSS, as the RX 6600 was in the mid 40s without any upscaling. And when you enable upscaling, that's when you reach 60 FPS. And for the Intel GPU, wait for my upcoming video on Doom Dark Age. It will be every ARC GPU in Doom Dark Ages. I feel a bit sad they didn't put in the minimum requirement. My guess it will be the A380 or the A580. Probably more the A580 since it have 8GB of RAM. And the A380 only have 6. I won't even bother with the A310, which only have 4GB of VRAM. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. And subscribe.